And after Representative Adams, we will entertain any questions from the media.
I was hoping that we would see more media here today on this important issue, but I want to thank you for coming. Joe the Plumber, his rights were violated. The Inspector General did his investigation and could not conclude that Mrs. Kelly was politically motivated. But when you read the document and the timing of the events, how could it not be politically motivated? I would hope that the media, we can bring legislation forward on both sides, but I would hope the media would keep pressure on this issue. And there is a solution. There's a solution that the governor can do, and that is to terminate those involved with this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. I want to thank all those who participated in today's press conference. We did make today's press conference available to the media, as we normally do, as the Ohio Christian Alliance. I can tell you that times past, the room would be filled with media, and today, for whatever reason, the media chose not to cover today's event. I hope that they will take opportunity with our press release that was made available to them. I will say that this stack of petitions of over 700 Ohioans is going to be delivered to Governor Strickland's office after this meeting. And we have hundreds more that have come in over the internet. This issue is certainly imperative to those who are the electorate out in Ohio. I've never seen an issue generate so much interest automatically by just simply asking folks to sign a petition online. It is not going to go away. And for the reason that the Ohio legislature now, it's incumbent upon them to address this issue. If the executive branch fails us in terminating the employment of those directors responsible for this violation of the privacy of individuals, then we turn to the legislature to address it, and they will the next session. So again, as a voter education organization, it's imperative and it's important to us that we have an atmosphere where folks can ask questions of candidates, participate in candidate forums, and participate in the electoral process without fear of reprisal. So we will keep this on the front burner as an organization. We will ask other organizations to join with us in the future until these questions are answered and the immediate situation is resolved, because there's so many questions that remain unanswered. Certainly, we want folks to be able to participate in future elections, and that's what we're going to encourage them to do. So without any further ado, if the media has any questions of any of our participants in today's press conference.
You're calling on the governor to fire the individuals involved in this. What else legislatively could be done, or would you like to see done to prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future? We
understand that, well, in the Inspector General's report, there was obviously the whole reference that the director thought that she, well, actually what she told the Senate President, members of the legislature, that when someone comes to the public's eye, it is protocol or policy that we do checks on them to see if they're do any child support or if they're on our records. After the Inspector General's report, it was found out that was not the case, that there was no such policy. The two previous directors stated that they knew of no policy. It wasn't in practice when they were the directors of those agencies. That's what prompted the letter by Senate President Bill Harris that has been made public to the governor, really urging the immediate termination of the director. The governor has not responded to that. Obviously, a lot of Ohioans feel and concur with the Senate President's call for the immediate termination of the director of the Job and Family Services Agency.
How do you balance the need to protect private information from transparency in government and providing public access to records and information? It seems like those two might be opposed or could be opposed in some people's minds.
Well, obviously the records are there for, maybe Senator Rendell would like to answer that because he is going to work on legislation in the Senate side.
I think there's a line that has to be delineated between the standards of what information that the government maintains is accessible to government, and we have to delineate what that is, and then we have to delineate what private information in government hands is not accessible by public records check to the public in general. Those need to be clearly delineated. I think that can be done, and then I think there needs to be one other issue for transparency. I think each agency needs to keep a log of when they're looking into private citizen records, who's doing the looking, and what's the stated governmental reason for doing that. So that, and then that needs to be transparent. That log needs to be accessible so that we can all see when we want, when are they looking into private records, and are they doing it for proper reasons. I grant you that it's not an easy delineation, but it can be done, and I think it needs to be done, because the problem is in the lack of taking those steps, we've created this situation, which is apparently you make up the rules as you go along, try to justify it on whatever justification when you get caught with your hands in the private record cookie jar, and I think we can delineate that. I believe there's a legislation being drafted both in the House and the Senate that will be coming forward shortly. Just for the record, I'm not going to be his lead sponsor. I hope it comes from my committee that's going to try to do that kind of delineation and transparency process.
But that's not something, you expect to get that done this session, or?
You know, I would hope we can get it done this session, because being blunt honest, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get out of the House next year. So I would hope that we can try to get this done, because I think the citizens of Ohio are entitled to have their privacy protected and not become a political football. I was serious when I said this issue is not about politics, it's about privacy and the right of free speech. I fear if we don't address it this year, next year, it will become about politics, and that will be unfortunate to the private citizens of Ohio.
That bill does actually have logistical problems.
Well, they have computers, I don't think so. I mean, you know, a government that creates forms, you know, and processes, I don't think it's that difficult to have a computer link that you would just go to when you make that access to log in, and you're accessing, you know, Tim Grendel's records, which I suspect may happen after this press conference, and you're doing it for such purpose. Now, the one thing you can't do in that is say what it is exactly you looked at, because then you would be creating a public record of very private information that we think shouldn't be invaded by government in the first place. So you have to be very careful of what is the content of that log. But I think in the day of computers, it's not hard to do. And I think, you know, there's a legitimate, as Representative Batchelor said, there's a legitimate need for government to have certain records. But for that, they should only access it for that legitimate need. I don't understand, frankly, having read the IG's report and the transcripts of the interviews, you know, how you can say, well, they didn't have any governmental purpose to access Ms. Wurzbacher's records, but we can't say it was for political reasons. Well, it wasn't because it was raining in Patagonia that day. It wasn't because the Cleveland Browns haven't been playing good football. You know, what other reason would it be? It reminds me of the law school. They used to say the story, did you see the guy testified that he bit off the ear, and they said, well, did you see him bite off the ear? No. How did you know he bit off the ear? I saw him spit it out. And then they sort of hear, there's no other justification that you could rationally conclude that they were looking into his records other than he made comments that were offensive to their candidate, and so therefore they were politically motivated. So I was disappointed that the IG failed to make what I think any jury out here would make as a rational link, you know, the old circumstantial evidence rule. And I think we need to make it clearer so that that doesn't happen in the past. We need to hold these folks accountable. I mean, you know, you can look at my records. I mean, they're for a public official. When I ran for office, I kind of waived that right of privacy. But I think the average citizen doesn't waive that right of privacy simply because they express themselves politically. And that's an important threshold. You don't want to chill people's political speech. I mean, if you think because you say something, the government's going to come down on you and track down your record and release it to the public, talk about chilling political speech in this country, that would be a disaster. I hate to run. I got to go. Chris, thank you again for everything.
Thank you, Senator.